So we're here to talk about racial disparities, and we're going to kind of walk through it. And I know you've done some research on this, but we're going to walk through it from cradle to grave,
Yeah.
and how Black Americans are affected by racial disparities. And we're just really just offering up the information. I think it's important that, I mean, this has been the year of, more awareness around this topic, right?
Yep.
And I know many of my white counterparts or white friends are looking for ways to become more educated on this topic. In fact, and so what I want to try to do today is try to provide that. And in fact, I have your picture is spinning. Can you still hear me, Mik?
Yep, I can still hear you.
I got you back. I have a white counterpart who, store manager, and we were having a conversation about, diversity and inclusion. And he was being very honest and open, and I appreciate it. He was being very vulnerable and said, I'm struggling with this. I don't know where to start. And I said to him, the first thing I want you to do is, and this is on a conference call we had, is to walk outside your house. And if you see no one that looks like you, that's the first problem. All right? So what I want you to do is engage people. When you go to the grocery store, when you go to the gas station, when you go anywhere, engage people who don't look like you in conversation.
Yeah.
And try and engage them in the context of trying to learn something about them. And I didn't think he was going to take my advice. And we had a call this past Monday, and he said, Devin, I took your advice. I did it. It was so rewarding. People thought I was crazy. I was trying to find all kinds of people that didn't look like me. And he did it, and it was great. And so I thought, people like him who are really wanting to engage in this topic may not know how to, may not have the resources or where to find the resources. So I want this show to be a resource for that.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we accomplish that today, guys. That's really the purpose of the show. And Mik is going to kind of throw some facts at us, starting from the cradle to the grave, and how there are these racial disparities. Okay, I just wanted to set it up quickly. Mik, so what do you got for us?
Yeah, so the thing I want to share for this are two things. Black infants are almost 4 times more likely than white infants to die from health complications, which is caused by low birth weight, which is the lead causing of infant death. That's the first one.
Okay.
And another thing I want to share is there have been studies that revealed that Black medical students and doctors believe Black people have a higher pain tolerance than non-Black people, which has over time led to them thinking Black people presenting with pain can be drug seeking. Right.
And that's an important one. I think that goes to the unconscious bias. And all this really is about that. But this is really about unconscious bias, right? This is really about you're fine, you just want drugs, as opposed to treating the person for their ailment. You have a personal story you wanted to share, or?
Yeah, so this is so interesting because I feel like you don't know until you hear other people's story that your story is similar to theirs. And I have been in multiple situations where I felt something was wrong. For a long time, I struggled from really immense migraines. And it was kind of like, oh, this may be your diet. It may, drink water, eat better. And I'm talking about like crippling migraines, can't, see, need to leave work, things like that. And I always just thought like, okay, I'm just going to try what the doctor's telling me. And then as you get older and you're realizing and you're seeing statistics like this, my mom is a perfect example, was struggling from extreme pain in her abdomen for months. And she was going to her primary care physician and nothing was really being done about it. And the pain was getting worse and worse. And she, went to see someone else and ended up having 3 cysts on her ovaries. And, for whatever reason, her expression of presenting pain was not, good enough to go and see what was wrong. And she ended up needing a procedure. So this really hits home for me.
So I want to pause on that one and let that sink in for everyone. And so this is what creates distrust among Black people in particular in the healthcare system. And you think sometimes, and I used to think growing up when I was a kid, that, you guys are crazy, go to the doctor. But there is this distrust that permeates throughout the community.
Right.
And as you get older, you begin to understand why, right? And I have this inherent distrust that I've learned that's been passed down from generation to generation. And I don't want to go to the doctor. And you don't really know why you have this distrust, but you have it, right?
Yeah.
So it's about finding doctors who can. There's a hashtag out there. It's called White Coats for Black Lives. And so finding a doctor who can treat Black people is something that we really have to look into, right? Yeah. And Black people have to become comfortable with the healthcare system, but it's going to start with the care they receive. Otherwise, they'll be very suspicious of it. All right. So what else you got? You had a stat about women giving birth, right? I think you wanted to share.
Yep. Black women are 3 times more likely than white women to die from preventable birth-related complications.
Right. Okay, so that's an interesting one, and that's something that's been talked about quite a bit this year, I know. And it's hard to put a finger on why that is, right? We just know that it is the case, but we can, I think, speculate as to why that is. Do you have any thoughts on that, or? Yeah. And I want this to be an open forum for everyone. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to add to the conversation, please do in the comment section. But again, I just want this to be an informative IG Live that we're doing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, most people probably know, obviously, Serena Williams, but if you look up her documentary on HBO, she actually talks about her near-death experience while giving birth to her daughter. She saved her own life in the hospital. She had to give instruction to the doctor on what her previous conditions are and what not to do to save her own life on the table. So again, We're talking about someone who is, we'll say, the 1%, right? Extremely rich, has, access that a lot of people in a poverty line do not have access to, and still had to save her own life on the table when dealing with a non-Black or colored person's doctor.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Hey, Kasha. And someone said Beyonce, I guess, had difficulty with her pregnancy as well.
Yep.
And you can probably write an autobiography of Beyonce, right?
I probably can.
All right, so let's go ahead and move along on the timeline. So we're going along. So we're starting with the birth, right? So let's move along. Now the child has to now go to school, right? So what happens when we send the child to school?
So, in general, students of color are disproportionately overrepresented among children with disabilities. Black students are 40% more likely, and American Indian students are 70% more likely to be identified as having disabilities over their peers.
And that's interesting, right?
That's very.
It's easier to label someone, right, with disabilities than to deal with them. It's easier to say they have ADHD, whatever, and give them medication, and as opposed to dealing with them. So that's interesting. If we don't see ourselves in others, if we don't see ourselves or see our children in the children that we're teaching, they become an imposition, right?
Yeah. Many children of color with disabilities experience a segregated education system, and that's, what I was going to say to the first point. Automatically you are separating the child, right? Automatically there's now a special needs class, there's a this, there's a that, there's something taking them out of their community of students into something that is just different. So regardless of if it's going to be helpful for the education, it's usually not in addition to, it's usually a separate space. So I no longer get to be in the classroom with the other students. I have to have a separate education now, where you would think that some of that, especially a learning disability, will be something they do in conjunction with them staying in their classroom.
Now, and what you guys start thinking about as we're going through these facts and we're taking you through the lifespan of a Black person, how would one feel about self? And what sort of confidence level are we creating in our youth? So just put yourself, if you can, in the shoes of this person that we're talking about, this hypothetical person. that we're talking about. They made it through. They beat the odds, and the mother didn't have an issue at birth, so the child was born. We put them in the education system, but we run into issues here, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, what else do you have for the educational system?
So for education, we also have, in a single year, 1 in 5 Black, American, Indian, and multiracial boys with disabilities were suspended from school, which doesn't seem, really disparaging when you take that fact alone. But when you start to think, as you said, of the trajectory of a Black man, you start to see how these things are so deeply embedded with the perception of Black men as they coexist in their societies.
So that we have a conditioning of that Black youth to prepare them for the eventualities of being Black in America, and we'll talk about that in just a second, which lead to, incarceration. We'll get to that in just a second. But when we start to deal with young Black boys as if, again, they are in a position or problem, and we have to somehow deal with them outside of the normal reprimands, then they get used to being treated that way. So keep us going. One troubling piece I just want to bring up is that while we have some students that are, in the classroom, I want to share a personal experience. So I was the kid who made straight A's, right? I was the kid who competed in math competitions, won trophies. I was sort of the nerd who played sports, right? Mm-hmm. And then I went to this middle school, which was a Vanguard program for special kids. And it was 33% Black, 33% white, 33% Hispanic, and I think 1% Asian. Mm-hmm. And it probably was the best and worst experience of my life because, I was this kid who was the smartest and the brightest or whatever. And I got to this school, and yes, there were other kids who were as smarter and even smarter, but that's not the point. The way I was treated was completely different because I went to an all-Black elementary school, right? Mm-hmm. And then I went to this a third middle school, and was treated different, was treated as other, was treated not special anymore. And so what? And they want to touch your hair. They want to do, I was treated like I was ignored. I was saying, I went from being, you have to understand this, I went from being one of the smartest kid in the school. I was also an artist, and I used to do all the drawings. I used to act in all the plays. My family, we sang at the school, so I sang. I did all this stuff. So this was, and I go to being a nobody overnight, right? And I spent 3 years in that school. So, but it was an eye-opening experience for me because I had never experienced other ethnicities, can't say the word, on that scale, but it was great to do that. So when I was there at that school, teachers expected nothing of me. Really? You know what I'm saying? They, when I was at my elementary school, they expected the world of me. They expected me to go out there and compete in the competitions, win the trophies, get the A's, get 100. If I didn't get 100 on some certain tests, they'd be all over me. But in this school, they expected nothing of me, right? And if I got A's, like, whoa, wow, you got an A, Or if I wanted to take advanced courses, I was challenged not to take those advanced courses. So Black children experience that. I dealt it with my own kids. I'm sitting there in front of the counselor, and they want to take honors English or honors, algebra, and she's trying to dissuade my children from doing it. It upsets me when it happens. Yeah. But this is what happens. And so the soft bigotry of low expectations is killing the aspirations of many Black children every single day. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. And we need to understand that, and we need to stop it, and we need to challenge Black children the same way we would your own. Okay? I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, but where are we on your list of things?
So if we continue with some of the education pieces, we have, Black and Hispanic students are still less likely than their white counterparts to have a high school diploma.
Yep.
The practice
if you feel, and I'm sorry, I'm adding some commentary every time you bring up, but it's important to add a little commentary. If you feel like there's no future, if you feel like, no one's investing in me. I'm going to school. I don't feel as if, I see how other students are being treated. No, I went from being a student that sat in the front of the class to sitting in the back of the class. I went from being a student that made straight A's, and I made my first C in my life in this middle school. And it's not because the curriculum was hard, it's because I stopped trying. Because I felt like no one was investing in me. No one cared if I got an A. In fact, it was expected that I was going to get a C. So think about that. Think about the kid who is, marginalized and, doesn't know what it feels like to get an A, but is marginalized and sees no career for themselves, sees no future for themselves. They're going to drop out of school, right? And try to find that future in other ways.
Yeah, I think I was watching a TED Talk recently that had to do with, I think it was called The Ethics of a Self-Driving Car. And basically the video goes into, weighing all the questions of, regardless of if the car decreases human error on the roads and there are less accidents, the programming of the car is done by a human. Regardless of what choice the car makes should an accident, happen, the programming, who gets to decide who programs the car? And even if a machine programs, someone has to program the machine. And so what decisions are made? And this really made me think about a lot of racial disparities, because the teachers, if we talk about education, just like we doctors in the medical fields, that people have so much influence. I remember a teacher telling me, not to hang out with I went to a school that was mainly white, maybe like 10% black. For middle school and high school, our schools were combined into one. And I remember this teacher telling me, you have to stop hanging out with those friends. They're going to lead you down a bad path. You're too bright to be with, hanging around this group. So here's a suggestion to isolate myself from a community that I feel comfortable in, that I was, I was still getting straight A's, hanging out with my friends. And then if I would have taken that advice, who would I be now as I enter college, as I enter the workforce? How would I be towards other people of color just because they may present differently than me? So I really think it goes back to like, who are the programmers? Who are the people in charge? Who get to make influence? And how much attention do we pay to that?
Great analogy. So someone's asking a question. How can we all come together and change this? Well, I think it's about, it starts with a conversation like this. And it's about awareness. And one thing I want you guys to do is, first, I'm going to say something that may not sound like it's related. Some of the best comedians, okay, it sounds like I'm going on a tangent, but I'm going to bring it back a full circle here. Some of the best comedians are people who have gone through something, right? If you think about it, who's your favorite comedian? Someone just yell one out. Mik, who's your favorite comedian?
Mike Epps.
Mike Epps, okay. Not where I was going with this, but that's okay. All right, anyone else?
Kevin Hart is, he could be funny. Chris Rock, Chris Tucker.
How about Dave Chappelle? Chris Rock, Dave
Chappelle is really funny.
The one thing that black people have always done is they've made fun of their circumstance, right? They've taken their situation and they turn into jokes. And this is not just on a stage, Kevin Hart. Okay. But in life, we do that. We tell jokes, we make fun of each other, but it's a way of expressing the pain, right?
Of course.
And so many of and I'm just saying just black people, but some of the funniest people come out of some kind of circumstance where there is pain, where there was difficulty growing up, right? Makes sense? So, but I want you guys to do this. Listen to some of the black, maybe not Mike Epps, but listen to some of the black comedians. I'm joking. And listen to some of the jokes they tell, but don't laugh at it. Think about it. Think about some of those jokes that they're telling when they're talking about racial disparities. They might be making a joke about it, and we all laugh at it, but they're really talking about some of the racial disparities that exist. Yeah. And I think that'll help you, understand some of the things that are going on. I'm sorry. That was a tangent. Workplace disparities. Let's talk about that. Okay. You went to school. Oh, no, let's talk about college. What happens when you want to go to college?
Yeah. So in college, I'm sure this will be not surprising. So Black and Hispanic students are concentrated at less selective and lower funded community colleges and four-year schools. The selective top tier schools are still mostly white and Asian. Black students take on more debt, while more white students finish a 4 degree within 6 years. And we're talking about an age group from 18 to 24 years old, just to give you guys some context.
Okay.
On average, white Americans 25 and older hold bachelor degrees at higher rates. We have the Black population at 19% and our white at 33%.
Wow. Okay. So guys, think about that for a second. So Black population at 19% degreed. They're going to carry more debt. They're already coming to the situation with less wealth and disadvantages. We're going to get to in just a second in terms of how much they're going to earn. So less wealth, acquiring more debt by going to school, and we're going to talk about some disparities with income. Think about that. Think about, you guys, we all have debt, right? How do you feel about debt? How does it make you feel emotionally? How does that affect your mental health? Think about those things. Anything else on college before we move to the workplace?
Do you want to get into the earning of a college student, or you want to wait?
We've got a comment here from Miss Dior. Can you see it?
Yep. The comment says, a few of my colleagues said they are used to wearing armor every day. They said, we are so grateful that you are going to fight for us now. It made me cry as I didn't realize all of this.
Oh, she is the leading up the anti-racism in that store. That's great. That's great. Yes, Black people have to wear armor. But we love to take it off. We'd love to. It's getting kind of heavy, right?
Okay.
Let's talk about workplace disparities. Now, you've gone to college, you've got that degree and the debt. Go get a job and pay for that debt, right? Let's go.
Yeah, so the employment population ratio measures the share of a demographic group that has a job, and it's been lower for Black people for years. Obviously, the unemployment rate has spiked, for all racial groups in the U.S. during coronavirus pandemic, especially high for Black Americans, 14.6% versus national percentage of 10.2%. Black Americans are underrepresented in high-paying jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics show that 54% of employed Asians worked in management, professional, and related occupations, the highest-paying major occupational category, compared with 41% of whites and 31% employed Blacks and 22% employed Hispanics. As of 2020, only 4 Fortune 500 companies have Black CEOs, and one of them actually recently stepped down due to a relationship that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah. So listen, guys, that is 0.8%. 0.8% of Fortune 500 companies have a Black CEO.
Not even 1%.
No. And we're talking about 14% of the population. So it's not because there aren't enough capable Black people. They just don't see Black people in that position. And I've shared some personal stories on this, and I'll be quick. I'm a store manager, and many people, depending on where you live, don't see this face as the face of a store manager, and they will let you know it. They will let you know it. And I've had people boycott the store because of what I look like. I've had customers call me the N-word. I've experienced, now how many people who are not Black have to deal with those sorts of things? There's no playbook that I could reach into my desk and find and say, okay, when someone calls me the N-word, here's what I do. Or when I have customers boycotting my store, what do? Right? I have to just sort of deal with those things. And I don't begrudge anything that's happened in my life, because I think everything that's happened to me and everything I've gone through has made me the person I am, and I'm grateful for that. The good, the bad, the ugly, right? But should we have to go through that is the question, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we don't have more than 4 Black CEOs. I've had many people in my career say, oh, one day you're going to be a CEO of a company. And I'm still where I am. And so the question is, how far should I be along on my career path, right?
Yeah.
Unless someone sees someone like myself in that role or capacity, there's no way I'm going to get there, right? And it's not for lack of trying. So anyway, that's my personal story.
Yeah,
What are
I
your
think
thoughts?
just along with the CEO conversation, a lot of people have had a lot of, I think, opposing views on a lot of the companies that have had their CEO step down and they replace them with a person of color. And the reason why I really support that is because at this point, it is 0.8%, right? You cannot become equal in, any of our lifetime. So yeah, we have to do some things that are odd, like physically put someone into the role.
Yeah.
Because it's they're not going to get there. A lot of CEOs, we're talking about people over half of their life. So how would we possibly do that through, grassrooting? So some people have to be, put into roles. And this
Right.
is a great statistic to back up why some of this is needed, and how we kind of start to repair what we can as far as getting people of color, Black people into, senior leadership, into CEO and VP positions in Fortune 500 companies.
Got it. So and you had to pay for that debt, right? Because you went to school and you didn't have that wealth to pay for college, so you had to accumulate debt. And so we go into financial disparities. What are your statistics there?
Yeah, so Black workers earn 62% of what the white average worker made. Black women earn 66% of what the typical white man made. Overall income for Black Americans was about 42% lower than for whites. The poverty rate for Black families over twice that of white families. Wealth of a typical white family is
Okay, guys.
171,000.
You're going to have to kind of say this one twice, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this one is wealth of a typical white family is $171,000, 10 times greater than the Black family.
10 times greater. That means 17,000. Okay. So, and wealth is not, I have a job and I make six figures, right? Wealth is
No.
about your assets. Wealth is about liquidity of the money that you own.
Yep.
Wealth is about your ability to give your children a down payment for their home so they can go out and buy a home and create wealth for themselves and those sorts of things. So these are issues that have to be addressed. And,
Yeah.
We're just talking about, the 2000s, 2020.
Right.
But the genesis of this obviously is racism, Jim Crow, and so on and so forth. At some point, we've got to figure out how to help Black Americans create wealth, right? How to generate wealth. It's not going to just happen.
Nope.
The best analogy I've ever heard was someone talk about playing the game of Monopoly, right? And I think everyone's played Monopoly before, right? Has anyone not played Monopoly? If you haven't, I will explain the game to you. No, I'm not going to have time to explain it. But if you play 400 rounds of Monopoly, right? If you and I play, and I never get any money while we're playing, I never get to buy assets, and then suddenly you say after 400 rounds, okay, now you can play. Now you can join the game. Okay, how's that going to work out for me?
Not well.
Right? Not well. And while we're talking about a game, this is real life, and this is what has happened, and so we need to understand it. And we're not giving all these facts to say, woe is me, and we're victims, and pity us. No, we're just giving these facts so you have some context, and that you learn about, the experience of Blacks in America, and so that you can be armed with this information and you can do your part to change it, right?
Right.
Okay, keep us going. Justice system disparities.
Before we get into justice system really quickly, I wanted to share. So I recently saw an apartment, and the person who showed me the apartment told me that the apartment, she was around, mid-20s. The apartment had been in her friend group for like 20 years. So these are people who she didn't know, but the apartment had just been passed down. Someone's parent had the apartment, and then they kept it in the family and then passed it down to friends. So anyone who is in New York City, in Manhattan, or wherever going to school has access to this apartment for a really reasonable price. And I thought, wow, how did they learn to do that? right? So I also think the other part of this is non-white people getting the confidence to take the risk, because we're so consumed in taking care of ourselves and our families that we barely can even think of or fathom doing something for like another Black family, or doing something that will create generational wealth for a community, not just our own families. So I thought that was interesting, because I thought, wow, that's so smart. You know,
That's
a
great.
rented apartment, they don't own it, they rent it, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. Great example.
Moving along, justice system. So Black inmates made up roughly 33% of the country's prison population, yet just 14% of the US total population. White inmates, meanwhile, made up 30% of the prison population and are 60% of the country's total population.
Okay.
Black men are roughly 5 times more likely to be in prison than their white counterparts, and nearly 13 times as likely in the age group 18 to 19. Marijuana usage rates are similar between white and Black Americans, yet Black Americans are almost 4 times more likely to get arrested on marijuana possession charges. And the last one I have for you is Black people are overwhelmingly more likely than white people to be under parole supervision, and they're more likely to be sent back to prison for minor infractions.
Yeah. Got it. Have anything on housing? Let's see. Maybe not. Okay.
Not anything.
So, we know that there's disparities with housing. We should have had some facts on that. My apologies. And then the life expectancy for by race. You know, white people live up to about 79. Hispanic people live up to 82. Wow, look at that. And Black people live up to the age of 75. So there's a disparity with life expectancy. But you can, as we walked you through all these things, right? You can begin to see and understand some of these outcomes.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I want to hear from the audience. What questions do you guys have? What thoughts do you have? Some people, and I've heard this argument before, may look at me and say, well, look at you. You did okay for yourself. Why can't, everybody do the same thing? I don't know, Mik, if you've heard that argument before.
Oh, of course. Of course.
And my response is always the same. When we do any kind of analysis, we always say, all things being equal, right? All things being equal, we start off with that language to imply that, the basis is the same for what we're about to discuss. But all things aren't equal, right?
Right.
So even within, we're not monolithic people. Within every race, you have people who are dynamic. You have people who are on all ends of the aptitude spectrum. Let me say it that way. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So you're going to have people who are amazing people and people who, probably have learning disabilities. Just for example, and everyone else in between. And so you can't judge individuals and groups. You know what I'm saying? So you can't look at one person and say, well, this person did it and the whole group can do it.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. Every individual needs something different to be successful. Every individual needs some specialized, individualized investment to be successful, right? As with any situation. And so, but if we look at groups as monolithic, then we're going to just dismiss the needs of that group because we can point to Herschel Walker, I'm saying that name intentionally, and say, oh, he was a great person, look what he did. Or we can point to, well, Barack Obama was president, so, there is no systemic race. No, you can't point to, Barack Obama was a dynamic individual, very smart, intelligent, went to Harvard. There are few people on this planet who are as smart as he is. So there's no reason why he wouldn't be president, right? It's a no-brainer. So, but you can't compare him to the average Joe in the hood, right, and say they have the same trajectory in life. They don't.
Nope.
They don't.
And people are a product of their environment. So
100%.
Have to take into
all things are not equal, in other words.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any comments here? I've been yapping.
Saying,
What's
so
going
how
on?
do we report this in the business environment? And I think that this is it's a difficult thing to really try to capture. I feel like that's something that I'm realizing now as I'm, involved in all this anti-racism work for a company. As you get higher up and you talking to people who have had the having to really deal with any of these things themselves because it hasn't affected them, they haven't had to think about it ever. Bringing them to awareness is one thing. Bringing them to action is a whole other beast in itself. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So we can report it, but I don't know that the reporting really promotes action.
Yeah, I always say that people need proportionate treatment. I don't like to use the word equal. This is just me personally. I like to think in terms of proportionality. So if we use words that are generalistic in nature, then we begin to think in general terms and treat people in those terms as well. We have to think in proportionality. We have to think in terms of where that person is on any spectrum that we're talking about, where they're in terms of their skill set, right?
Right.
You don't need the same investment that others might need. So don't marginalize me, right?
Yep.
Allow me to grow at my pace and at the rate that I need to grow at. But for someone else, give them what they need. If they need more investment, then don't begrudge the fact that you have to invest in that individual more than you do someone else. And understand that that is a fact. And as a leader, it is your job to do such, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's where we get into issues with the education system, right? That now this kid just has a disability because maybe they need something different. Same thing in the workplace. I don't have time to help this person, so I'm going to bring this person on. So it's, again, exactly what you're saying. That's just how it looks when it comes down to it.
Yes. I think Mom is agreeing with what I just said. Absolutely. Yeah, meet people where they're at. That's Mik's mom, by the way. Meet people where they are, and that's what it means. Yeah. So we have to invest. What are the questions or comments that you guys have? Again, the premise of the show was not to say that we're all victims. It was just to inform, to provide data, empirical data that cannot be disputed, right? Numbers are stubborn things, right? The facts are stubborn things. And it is what it is. But the question is, and we've been asking, what do we do about it? How do we address it? And I would encourage everyone to do what I encourage my counterpart to do, is to find people that don't look like you and talk to them. Engage in conversation. And just because you work with people who don't look like you and you talk about business, it's not the same. I'm talking about having personal conversations about, who they are. We've got to begin to see people outside the four walls. We got to begin to understand what Mik means to the people that love her. And then when we begin to understand what Mik means to the people that love her, we gain a greater sense of who she is. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then we begin to see the similarities that we may have in our family, in our cultures, and our backgrounds, and that we share values and we share experiences. I had someone on the show last week, Jacqueline, and she and I had this conversation, and she's a white woman, right? But we have so much in common. We have so much in common. After we talk to each other, and we found out, wow, we have a lot in common. So why don't we start with just that, a conversation? Not about work, not about things inside the four walls, but what makes you who you are? What makes Mik Mik? Mik, what makes you you? Tell everyone what makes you you.
My family, my Jamaican roots. I would say being a foodie. Food makes a lot of who I am. And I think just my passion to inspire others. My faith. I was literally just thinking about the scripture that says there is no Jew nor Gentile, male nor free, freed or slave, because it is so that's what you need to think about to get to know someone sometimes. It's like, we are humans at the end of the day, and how do I like strip down all of these things to get to a place where I look at you as a human being first, and then go from there with everything else that has to go. I really think it changes the trajectory of how you treat people.
100%. I know I put you on the spot. Thank you for doing that.
No, it's fine.
All right. What else? What questions you guys have? Tell us what makes you you. Put it in the comments. Tell us about your unique self.
Ooh, Jen, you grew up with Senegalese people. That's an interesting fact. Seneca said booty.
She says you have an amazing heart as well.
Aw, thanks, Sen. Devin, I have a question for you.
Oh, hang on one sec. What do we got here? What is this? First person to welcome me into management. Oh, got it. Hi, hang on. What is mom saying?
Oh, I missed it. I gotta scroll up.
People are uncomfortable in their norm and don't want to break away. And also, we blacks are looked at as less than human. So there is the notion that there is no extra effort. Very good point. Very good point.
Mm-hmm.
True triggers me. You're amazing. That's for you, I'm sure. Jamaican makes me unique. Okay. You have a question for me? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
What's your question?
My question is,
Fire it away.
First
of all, this is my show. I ask the questions, but go ahead.
Special guest privileges.
Okay.
First guest privileges. So as you think about school for Noah, how do you think about making that decision? I know it's in, far off land, but what are the preliminary thoughts around that?
What do you mean exactly when I think about that?
Where homeschool, public school, private school, what are you looking for as you pick a school? Well,
his mother is on this live, and we actually haven't had that conversation yet, so I'm not sure I should answer for her.
Well, what are things you're going to be thinking about? I'm not saying making the decision.
I think, the things I always think about, this is kid number 5 for me, and I think it has to be a diverse school. We have to grow up he has to grow up, in a diverse neighborhood. He has to be able to see himself, even though it's going to be hard to do because he's a unique mix. But he's going to be a brown baby, so he has to see himself in others, So I think diversity is key, not just with students, but diversity in teachers. Growing up, now at the elementary school, where I remember my story, I made straight A's and I was like the star student. Mm-hmm. Most of my teachers were black in this elementary school, which is unusual. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they saw the humanity in me, and I felt so great at this school. But from middle school to high school, most of my teachers were white, and I didn't feel challenged. I felt marginalized. So he's got to be able to go to school, not only where the students are diverse, but the teachers need to be diverse as well. He's got to be able to learn from all cultures, people from different backgrounds, so he gets the full experience. I think that's important.
Yeah, great.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, my mommy's post said, after COVID, I'm really considering homeschooling.
Okay. We haven't really talked about that. He's not even 2 years old yet. So.
Well, I know. But...
What other questions you guys have? Or Mik, what other question do you have for me? Or any other questions?
Kurt says, how do you develop resources for each portion of individuals?
What's that?
How do you develop resources for each portion of individuals? I'm not sure.
I'm not following the question. Can you elaborate more on the question?
Yeah.
Traveling does help.
Yeah, we want to answer your question. Just elaborate a little bit.
Elaborate a bit on your question.
I'm looking to see if there are any more.
This is what you call the pregnant pause.
Anyone else have any questions, comments?
Ahmed, you want to restate your question so we can answer it?
Hold on.
Hold on. Okay. You can type hold on. Anyone else has a question, observation, a comment? Again, just want to reiterate, tonight's show was about educating everyone on some of the stats that impact the racial disparities from cradle to grave of Black Americans.
Yeah, I know for me, just even all of the Cradle comments, as I look to hopefully the next portion of my life, starting a family, I'm thinking about, sheesh, now I got to be like thinking about what hospitals and doctors and things like that because of, you know, these statistics that are very real.
Resources. I'm trying to follow you. I'm sorry. I'm really trying to follow you.
Yeah, I'm still kind of.
My mommy's pulse. Help me out here. Resources in terms of.
Are you saying like how do we provide resources for different groups, minority groups? And then Jen, I see your question of how can I work harder? I don't think it's even a question of working harder. I think it's a question of being consistent. I think that will go so much further along because oftentimes we kind of gather things and then as life happens, as work happens, we kind of fall away from them. So for me, I know consistency would be the thing that I would ask for.
I would say also that, and I know, Roberta, you're doing some great work at Herald Square. I look for the day when this is not a strategy. It's just how we live our lives. And, how do you not be racist? Do we need a strategy for that? How do you be considerate? Do we need a strategy for that? How do you see the humanity in others? Do we need tactics for that? How do you just have a conversation with someone? Jen, please, I'm not attacking you right now. I appreciate your question. But my point is, I think we have to stop thinking so hard about it, right? I think the answer is as simple as, talk to people, see the humanity in people, get to know people, stop for just a second labeling people. I sometimes think I wish we lived in a world where there were no labels, where we just saw each other for who we are. But, labels are important for identity purposes. I get that. But, they should be just for that reason, not to be used for any other purpose other than to determine my identity so that I feel I have an identity. But it should not be used by others. Identity is for me, not for you, right? Does that make sense? That's why it's an I in front of the word. Identity is for me.
Right.
It's not for you to use. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Some would say cultural appropriation.
Because I just made it up on the spot just now. So I want to make sure it makes sense. So, if people were to think of identity that way, it's not for you to use to put me in a box and categorize me. It's for you to say, how do I understand you better? What does that mean to be Jamaican? What does it mean to be Black in America? What does it mean to be whatever you identify as?
Right.
Maybe non-gender. We can get into those topics as well. What does it mean? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we have to do. We have to stop making it hard. It's really simple. And I'll tell you something. I'll leave you guys with this thought. Black people have been doing this for forever. We have no choice but to integrate. Right? If we want to go into the workforce, we have no choice but to integrate. We have no choice but to get to know people and understand people because we're trying to get somewhere and get ahead. We're already 5 steps behind.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there is no opportunity, and I say Black people of color, people who are, I'll just say it, non-white. We've
Yeah.
been doing this for a while. So what we need is for all of Americans to get on board with this. Let's just have a conversation with it. Let's just be curious about each other, who we are, and what it means to be whatever we identify as. I hope it made sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Any other questions?
We had a lot of people disagreeing with what you were saying.
Okay. It's hard for me to pay attention and talk at the same time.
Yeah.
Mentally exhausting. You're right. It is mentally exhausting. But there's never a day that I look in the mirror and say, I hate who I am. I'm upset that God made me this way. I am so glad that I am who I am. And everyone has to feel that way. Everybody has to feel that way.
Yep.
You cannot have any type of self-hate at all, because first of all, the things that are perpetrated against you aren't your fault, right? It's those external factors. So, but those things just make you stronger. They make you better. They give you compassion, right? I think I am the leader I am today because I've gone through so much in my career. You know, I wouldn't be this compassionate if I hadn't had people treat me, differently, right? Or feel alienated. Now I can understand what others are going through.
Exactly.
So, all right, you've heard me pontificate for the last 15 minutes of the show. All right, anything else, Mik, on your mind?
Yeah, I just say to close something that my Bible study teacher says all the time, which is, to hear is to just practice your sense of sound, but to listen is to play out what you've heard. And that is something that I think when I see a lot of things about, what can we do? How can we help? When we talk about allyship, that listening piece will help you take action. So I guess my ask would just be that you listen and you don't just hear people.
That's a great way to end the show. All right. Everyone, this has been a great show. We've actually run over our time, and that's okay because this is a very important topic. So I appreciate everyone joining the show and for staying on so long to have this dialogue with us. So thank you, Mik, for doing this with me. This is
Of course.
it's hard to find someone to talk about this stuff with, and you are the perfect guest to do it with. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.